just be in person in the library. So I appreciate all of you for doing that. And before we get started, always people remind me of some good things to share. So before we get started, I just wanted to mention and announce some friends in the room that we might not all know. So we have a new primary interventionist here. I'd like to welcome Michelle Hamilton to our team, so thank you. Kathy's going to introduce her friend.
So this is Grace Burnside. She is at CU Boulder going to school to become a speech language pathologist. So she's my intern until the end of April. And she's awesome.
And Mr. B is in the cyber world, so he'll be waving to us around different times. He's in our office. Happy birthday, Mr. B.
Mr. B.
And we have a very sacred hour of learning today from now until 4:15. So there's going to be some updates and things like that that I'll share on email tomorrow morning. Today we're really going to take the whole time to really devote our time into some work around SEL work that we've been really devoting our time to at our Drive and PBIS work as well. So I'm really excited to share this with you and kind of be partnering with Ms. Shea around this piece. Also wanted to thank Ms. Reed and Mr. B just for helping with all the technological configurations of this, because it took a lot of different logistical conversations over the last, hour or so even, up until this time. So we're gonna just open with the following. We're just gonna watch about a 4-minute video together. I want you to just kind of drop everything, just kind of watch the video. And then after that, I just want you to kind of take a little bit of a journal note about what's resonating with you after you finish the viewing. All right, so we'll get started with that.
So I've got my essay written, and I've been working on it for about a week. So now I'm going to show you how I use Grammarly to edit. Okay, so here's my essay, and I'm going to click through Grammarly suggestions in the right panel. Your sentence.
thank you. Just take a minute. What's resonating with you? What's on your mind after that? Take about 30 more seconds just to finish jotting down what your reflection is. All right, thank you for that. Thank you. That's a lot in there. There's a lot to unpack in that 3.5-minute video, right? So I hope you took some time just to reflect, maybe think about some different things that connect to anything that resonate with you, and maybe it gets you to that lens of our students, our place here too. So I'm gonna kind of just begin just by opening up our learning targets for today, and kind of to set the course of what our next learning is gonna look like. So today, our 2 learning targets are, I can plan for quick wins that will support my students' social emotional growth. And the second one is I can reflect on what the student experience is and how it might impact their ability to engage in learning. So those are gonna be our 2 drivers for our learning today. And what I want you to do next with your device is there's a target reflection here, and the targets are on that page. And you can just quickly open up that document and find a line to call your own, and just quickly jot for a minute about what sticks with you. Like, what do these targets mean to you? What do you think you're anticipating for today? What are you looking forward to for today based on those targets?
It is in a Google Classroom.
Is anybody feeling tired? Our batteries are running low. It's kind of popping up on the screen too, right? Just notice too, there's two columns, so we're gonna circle back and right at the very end. We're just gonna capture our thoughts at the very end. So that first column is like at the beginning. Sorry about that, I should have just shared that out loud too. The second column, you just wanna copy paste it over, and then you make room for that closing. Take just another half minute to just close your thought there. All right, thank you for that. So, just wanted to get us engaged into learning targets and just kind of anticipating some of our next pieces ahead today. So the next slide, again, is going to just take us into a collective space where we're gonna collaborate with the folks that you're sitting with and take us into some research. And this is great research that's connecting us all the way back to the beginning of the year around our emergenetics training. So can you think about like your colors, right? And those colors that are your strengths, those places that you might use to fall into a learning experience or how you interact with others. Think about that. A lot of this reading is gonna really hone us back to that and get us back acclimated into that work. And at your tables, first take a look at reading through that. And there's some great quick reads. You can kind of read all through some different things about your own particular strength areas, or you can peruse maybe to that other side that is not as that strong point or what you're leading with. And then what we'll do is we'll discuss those connections to that text before we kind of take a look at some data today from our SSIS data between the fall and the winter, which represents some amazing celebrations that we can see. So what I want you to do is just right now engage into the emergenetics, find your why. That's kind of what we all like to do. How many of us are really structural thinkers? See a lot of hands up, right? And so really that finding our why, knowing our why, that's so critical. And so that's kind of the why behind also this research and helping us understand what's our point in our work with this piece with SEL today, all right? So take a minute, dig into that research, read, discuss your connections, and we'll take 10 minutes for that.
Okay, you guys are just gonna get the camera for some discussion about that. Spider legs. Is honestly one of the things that gets made of you know, what are those methodologies? Like I really enjoy learning like some ways to improve my work. And so like that piece speaks to me too. One of those possibilities that come from my teaching, like I get really excited to kind of see when the kids kind of come to me and be like, oh, I used my strategy today, Miss Shay, like I remembered to do my breathing, and I was like, that's fantastic, and having that positive impact on the future. So when I think about that conceptual piece, like that really resonates with me, and I think that makes sense given that that's my biggest piece.
Yeah, I missed the first part.
I guess the social. Yeah, I just think I feel like I'm a social person most of the time, and I think after looking at those questions, the one that resonated with me the most is who do I love engaging? No. Yeah. Who do I love engaging with in my school community? So I'm looking at that, and I have those people, but then I think about, but there's a lot of people I don't engage with. Not that I don't like to, but like primary. I don't engage with primary because I don't work with their students. But it's important still to engage in some way to keep that school community together. I think so, not only thinking about just the people I work with, but everybody. If that makes sense.
The one, I am analytical for sure. I'm a geek when it comes to looking at the data and understanding what's happening, getting to the root of what story do these numbers present for a child, and then make it match the child. Sometimes I feel like the numbers don't always tell the whole story, and there's more to the story that the numbers can give us, and I have to do a better job of looking at the whole child. So looking at that social piece, we have a student right now who, he's a third grader, and he can't read CBC words fluently without shutting down. And every day I go home and I'm like, he's gonna end up in prison, he's gonna drop out of school, and I'm like carrying that weight. But he shared this week that his mom is moving, and he doesn't know like when he's gonna see her again. So I have to remember that his priority right now is his family, and when he gets to see his mom, it's not about learning how to read. So when he gets mad at me, I have to remember that. So it's not all about the numbers and the research. You have to look at, I guess, every piece of the child.
I think my connection is kind of more like the big picture of it, of like reading over the questions and just seeing that they're really inspiring somebody to look at the assets every day. And then just sitting here listening to all of you, I was thinking about how it connected to that first video. Like it wasn't just the kids in the video, the students, it was also the teachers. And that it is like, there's so many anxieties for kids, for ourselves, or the stress, but it's taking care of ourselves so we can take care of everyone else. So I just think looking at those questions are like, yeah, these are the questions I need to be asking myself when I'm driving into work or before I go to bed, not like, well, what's going to happen or why is it going to be terrible, but why am I doing this? What's the difference I'm going to make? What are the positive things of why I'm here? and that there is so much positive to be seen with that.
And you know this group is watching you because you're doing your show first, and then it'll be vice versa. So it's funny because you can play your kindergarten buddy card and then your 5th grade buddy card on the other end.
Yeah.
That's just funny.
Yeah, I think it's been a cool,
A duality.
like it might have been good to have waited till January to actually start it because it's the
Everybody kinda
maturity
needed that time to
pieces
get
and like kind of earning it. You know, it's not just a given. You have to kind of earn it.
Maybe gives them a little bit more perspective too. About
Yeah.
just, here's the crazy kindergartners.
Exactly.
And, like maybe that helps them to reflect a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, yeah, when
You
you're in
didn't
that
get to do that
position
last year,
trying to
right?
help control.
Yeah.
Your script is flipped for a second.
Yeah. That's been good.
Yeah.
Oh, I agree.
But I'm settled, right? And so I'm not looking for big changes because I want to be thoughtful, but I need something. Right. Because if it'll start, you know, unsettled becomes stagnant, becomes uncomfortable. So that's these kinds of reflections. But don't you feel like as teachers you're a reflective person to begin with, or you wouldn't be in this profession? Yep. Don't you think you do this in ebb and flows with these questions without a formal setting? You're doing that all the time. You're doing that. We do it with our kids. I think you're reflective in nature. Otherwise you wouldn't be a teacher.
Right, and I think when, especially when we're cognizant of modeling that for our students, so it's like, you know, you want to help them to be thinking about these things, and it's hard to do that if you're not also doing that for yourself, so.
I think it's also hard to find the time to do it with the kids in a productive way, because you have to find that balance of their social and emotional growth against their academic growth. And
So do you think that's more
but-
organically done then?
I
And
do.
not
I
a
think-
whole group thing, it's more organic as the kid, as they present themselves?
Exactly, I think that is.
Yeah, I think when you do SEL or any of this stuff as a, this is what we're learning about social emotional today, it falls flat. It has to be more organic to where they are when they are. I can tell Jane, or any kid that you guys have, or Maya, what's the right way to handle your anger in a lesson. But it means nothing until we have time. So that has to be organic, that's what you're saying, because otherwise there's no time. And the impact isn't lasting.
And they know.
I'm really good at telling my kids that. I'm like, will it matter in 5 minutes, 5 years, 5 months? Will it matter? Then if it doesn't, you need to let it go. And it's funny because I can tell them all the advice, but taking my own advice is much more challenging. So that's, I don't know. I'm wise to others, not so much with myself.
That's like the old phrase that Homer's house is really
Yeah.
they take care of everyone else but not themselves.
Thank you, everybody. I want to just have us pause for a second. And there's some really fabulous, rich conversations going on. And honestly, it feels great just to be together in this library. It feels like it's been a really long time since we've done that too. But just kind of walking around, there's so many conversations that are hitting on ourselves, on our students. Would anybody like to share just like what is something that is resonating with you after you're taking a look at some of that emergenetics research? What's something that your group kind of raised up and talked about?
I could go. We were just kind of talking about, like the kids didn't take this identity piece, like so the analytical, structural, social, and conceptual. So we're kind of talking about, especially with this team over here, like knowing all of our kiddos, like where we think maybe some of those kiddos would be placed, and what some of these questions of like why and how, like what they're learning, what are you excited to become an expert in, or what are you hoping for, or who are you hoping to work with, and like seeing like their perspective of where maybe kiddos would fall since they haven't done that testing, and like what might be questions to ask individuals for them. So I thought that was an interesting too.
Yeah, absolutely. That engagement, how well do we know our kids? What are their strengths? And it'd be powerful to hear their reflections about some of those emergenetics responses.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Another group that wants to share just what resonated with you, what's kind of stuck out in some of that emergenetics piece that you circled back to?
I'll kind of share what second grade mentioned over here.
That'd be great.
At the beginning of the year, learning what color we each fell into was kind of fun and silly, but as the year has gone on, they really found how they complement each other and how they really all bring something different to the table, and they just flow together, they work together, and they can lean on each other when they need to. And I totally agree, we have that in kinder too, and I'm sure everybody kind of feels that.
Thank you, Alex. And I think that's like the power of we are enough, right? And some of those reflection questions, sometimes I know a lot of us leave the day and go, I'm not enough. That was such a hard day. I didn't get to something. I didn't get to a student. But the power of our collaborative teams and that we all have different strengths and those things that we can share, that just feels so like helpful in the world that we're in right now, especially in our school, right? That we're not alone in that work. So Alex, thank you for raising that up. Appreciate that. So that just helps us to kind of get acclimated to that collective space of some connections of how we enter different kinds of thinking, how we enter even some data, because we all have some different ways that we look at data and some different perspectives of that. And before we just dive in, and Erin kind of launches this piece with us, I know Erin's going to talk about some different pieces before we look at those different slides there about the why, again, we're looking at that data. And then we'll also starting to take a look at this as from that student perspective. So that's what we're going to start to take a look at is bringing our focus to a student, to one student. Maybe it's to your whole class, but really kind of just filtering down to what is on your mind about a kid that really is growing right now and that you're really excited about and that you still want to see that further success over time.
All right, will you go to the next slide for me, please? Thanks. So we're just gonna kind of dive in with like a big old celebration because if you can see here, our growth has been enormous. And I will say that in my last sales meeting, as we were kind of like still in the throes of collecting this data, they really warned us. They're like, just a heads up, you know, we're already starting to see some trends. The data's dropping across the district, so be aware. You know, don't be disheartened. That's just kind of how things go. And I looked at our data and I was like, oh, we didn't drop. Like, we went up, like, in all the areas. And it's really exciting to see that kind of growth. So, always, data is about the people, those kids that we're serving in our rooms. So we want to make sure that we are connecting it to those kids. So just take a second and really think back to where your kids were, you know, August, September, even October. Think about one or two specific kids and think about where they are today. Think about the kind of growth they've made. And as we all know, you know, growth is not entirely linear. You know, we're still going to have those ups and downs, even amidst the growth, you know, just because they've grown some doesn't mean they don't have bad days. But it's just such a great feeling to know that, you know, we've really helped. We've really been working with these kids and helping them grow. And it's just such a huge celebration. And I've been seeing the immense amount of work that all of you are putting into your kids every single day. And so I just really wanted to make sure that we celebrate that because it's such a wonderful and beautiful thing that we're doing for our kids. So thanks for doing that. So this is just kind of a general overview. If you go to the next slide, this is kind of where we are with our data in January. And the following, there was not enough room on this slide for both data sets. So the October data is on the following slide. But if we're looking just at this one, you remember that our self-management was really our lowest point. And technically it still is. However, we have made tremendous growth. So if you look, you know, we were at 22% in the yellow and 2% in the red. And if you go to that next slide, we were back at 8% in the red all the way back in October. And I say all the way back even though it was like 3 months ago. Right? It's really not all that long ago. That's a lot of growth. And again, I attribute that to all of the work that you've been doing. I know that as a school, we really focused in on that self-management piece. We asked you really to kind of focus on doing those cell lessons around that self-management, and it worked, right? So it's really fantastic to know that we are making a difference. And, you know, of course, our data is really only as good as what we do with it. Go ahead and go to the next one. And so this is just kind of another breakdown. These are some of the lessons in the SSISL on that website. And you can kind of see here, I think this is really interesting. So our self-management, you know, that average rating of 3.03 is still our lowest data point here. But another thing that I kind of, so this, as you're kind of thinking about, okay, what are next steps? This makes sense. Like if you wanted to think about where to focus next, we could continue to focus on self-management. But I also want to point out something else that I thought was interesting about the data, which was that social awareness is up here at 3.3, and it's our highest one. However, relationship skills are down here at 3.06, which is our second lowest. And I feel like that is kind of a huge disconnect, right? That social awareness, what we notice about other people, how we understand them compared to actually what we do, there's a pretty big disconnect there, right? So I kind of, and we're going to take a little bit of time today to decide what our next steps are. Like for you in your classroom, you know your kids the best, you know what they need. Yes, this data is helpful, but of course this is whole school data. You can also log into the SSISL and see your own class data if you would like to see what makes the most sense for your class. But just as we're kind of taking a look, like I just wanted to show you two different ways to interpret the data, because yes, we can always focus on that lowest piece, but what are maybe some other things that we could focus on, since we have spent a lot of time focusing on this self-management? How else could we interpret this data? And go ahead and go to the next one. So, again, data is only as good as what we do with it, so we need to use the data that we have to help us move forward. We're going to ask you to use that planning tool, the 6 T's for engagement. I know Mr. Brumfield has talked to you all about that in your team meetings. And then you're going to pick a resource to use. You can either use Second Step, the SSISL class-wide intervention program, which had all those lessons on that previous slide that kind of line up, or that PBIS World that we had shown you, well, I don't know, almost a month ago now, I guess. And we're going to ask you to, in your teams, work together to plan a cell lesson for either a circle or for a longer cell session. We're going to give you probably 10
to 12 minutes.
10 to 12 minutes? 10 to 12 minutes to kind of work through. And again, we're looking for those quick wins. If we think back to our learning targets, we're really looking for a quick win. This doesn't have to be a huge lesson that you're doing, but just what do you want to target next? So go ahead and work with your teams. We'll call you back in about 10 to 12 minutes.
So which one?
The PBIS, I feel like has those quick and easy thingies. Yeah. I don't remember. You click your biggest behavior and then kind of like that.
Yeah. Okay, let me pull that.
John, I'm gonna have you be
You're like, oh, wait.
Hi.
I'll take notes.
Like, what are we wanting to work on as we?
I feel like for mine, it's just like being nice to each other.
I was gonna say relationships.
Just relationships. I feel like especially as we're bridging to middle school, I feel like we need to really work on those kinds of, you know, there's a, we were talking about drive today, so I was, integrity always comes up, but I really think they're really having a hard time talking to each other and communicating with each other and understanding each other. I mean, one of my reflections was, I want to find another video that's for those younger kids that's similar to that video, because I think that kind of video would really resonate with our kids. So anyway.
Well, and I was thinking through that, even that video ties to those relationship pieces, like you have your sharers, like the ones that share what's going on, and then you have the ones that don't share what's going on, you know? So this idea of like, even for the kids, some kids know what's going on in other people's lives and others don't, and being able to have that empathy piece that, and then actually acting on it, because I think that's where we're starting to be aware of some of those pieces, but we just can't quite then, how does that look of how I treat them, or how does it look
Well,
like?
that's the beauty of fifth grade, right?
Yeah.
Because you're going from like sort of egocentric to
Understanding and having empathy for other people, because you can think more abstractly.
Yeah, and actually doing something with it, and they're starting to recognize it, but don't know how to.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
like which one of those was PBIS? The PBIS one.
World,
that was really...
yeah, let's check that one out, because I think that seems to be something that resonates with you, because our conversations about being nice to each other, so relationships. So we all kind of, good.
Yeah. When actually Erin shared a book with me about 2 weeks ago that was like that video, but it was stories. It was each chapter, so it was more of like a short little chapter, but each chapter was the story of a different kid in their class, but on the same board. And she was saying like to use it, and it was that same thing of like a perspective taking, like that, where it's like this.
Oh, I do too.
So it's like it followed the kid from morning through their day.
And all the things that had kind of happened and how they felt that day.
Yeah, to build that empathy.
I like that.
Yeah, like they're taking other people's perspectives and then having that direct comparison to their class.
Well, and then that could
I
be.
wonder, okay, sorry, I'm just thinking, I wonder if I could have something on cards with different situations. Is there any way we could do like a role play? Like you just found out that your brother needs to go to the hospital, or I don't know, some kind of scenario things where...
Well, like what kinds of scenarios are in the book?
Yeah. So that would be appropriate.
Yeah, I've only kind of glanced at it. I haven't used it, but it was that thing moving towards using it for morning meetings. But I think it's similar to that, like parents arguing, having a fight with your brother before you come to school, or not having enough food, that kind of thing. So kind of just more thinking about that variety of home life.
I wonder if it would be again like that piece where if you could, because we could totally use that as like one of those quick lessons of like reading a section of that and then having the kids, we could even tie it to drive of some nature. Like, how do we then, we now have empathy for this person because we realize what's going on. Now how could we treat them, or how could we show respect to them, or how could we show value to them as we now know that they're struggling with that, or something like that, like tie of something to that together could be kind of a cool.
Because I think the hardest thing, this is what I put in my reflection, the hardest thing for kids, or what I'm trying to realize, is that sometimes the behavior that they present doesn't match the emotion that's going on inside them. Like sometimes it can be silly and really inappropriate during class, but it might just be that they're really sad about something, you know, like their puppy is dying or something. I don't know. I'm just grabbing. But you would think they'd be sad, but they're not. It's counterintuitive to what, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so I think, I don't know how to like mesh how people can.
You have them write a letter to you. Like you had them write a letter, right? When I remember Heather talking about this, and I always thought it was such a great idea, and I never did it, was that idea of just a morning piece of like how you're feeling, anything you need to know for the day, that they just journal, and then you can look at their journal.
Why don't we do something simple like that? Like,
that just gets us like, this is my headspace for today.
And how about relationships and behaviors and things that you see, like what's going on? Maybe that's as simple as that. Maybe just writing a letter, especially at this age.
And just not even like a letter, just literally a journal.
Or a
like,
journal.
Here's today, here's how I'm feeling today, kind of that 1 through 5 check-in, but it's not. And then somehow tying those into, because again, that's bigger, but that relationship in that piece of the book and tying into like, as I read those stories every day or what you guys write every day, I start to see like what you're experiencing and how that might affect your day. Now, how can you do that for other people or something?
Because I feel like it's the first step of making sure they're heard, whether it's by us or by each other. So having like the morning circle share or like personal, like something they don't want all their classmates to know about us doing. But then it's that other piece of them treating each other with respect.
Yeah.
It's maybe more of that lesson piece separate from the share.
Because I think being heard, I like what you said, being heard, because that's really important to them. But sometimes it's equally important as listening to other people. Because I think
that's that, like what you were saying.
It's like it's going both ways, people. It's going both ways, right? Yeah.
So, I don't know, was there any lessons we think, or just off of maybe just starting some journaling?
I think the journaling
pieces and then looking at that book, maybe a little more in depth, and then, again, I think we really have to connect it, showing our data, and just showing that relationship piece, like, how do we now start, because it's only going to get harder as we head into middle
and
school.
really, it kind of connects with our growing and changing, and all the changes that are going on, and things that people are dealing with. I mean, we're all dealing with lots of different things going on in our family and with our bodies, and friendships are changing. There's a lot that these fifth graders are going through. Sometimes we forget that,
Yeah,
or at
because
least
they're very upset that this Valentine's dance
Oh,
is
I
not
know.
happening this year. It's like, oh no, and we're looking forward to it, this class.
Well, I love the journaling. I like the book idea. I think maybe a little bit of role playing, maybe that would come later on. Maybe this is a couple of weeks, and I don't even know if we could pull. It's too early to pull in anything from Growing and Changing quite yet, but.
Well, then even maybe like taking the book as inspiration, like whether or not we read all the way through it, but it could be that role playing piece of like having the kids, like the book would give you the backstory, but the problem is like you don't always have the backstory. Like kids in the moment, like somebody grabs the pencil off your desk, and like how are you gonna respond to it? Are you gonna like scream at them for that, or just taking like you don't know what their background is? Maybe they've had nothing wrong today, but like what are they going through that you're treating everyone with kindness? Right. Just like I don't know, that like maybe a role playing in that moment, but tying it to just always thinking about what people are going through that you don't see kind of under the surface.
So there's a parable about the six blind men and the elephant.
90
So the
more
blind
seconds to
men,
finish up those
this
conversations.
parable, it's an Indian
90
parable.
more seconds.
Oh yeah, like
It's like they can't see, so this is how they see. But it's really understanding that we're kind of complicated beings, and there's so many layers to us, right? But there's, they don't understand the elephant because they only get one little piece of the elephant. So there's only one little piece that we see of each other. We're not really seeing the whole piece, right?
Well, and you could do even not like role play, but basically present a scenario like with no background information, right? How you react to that. Like how would you react to this situation?
Oh, I like that idea.
And then give the background story. How would you now react differently?
Somebody
like
yeah,
kind of that piece of like, oh, okay, now that I know this, would you have acted differently? Yes or no? Because if your answer is no, like no, I would actually still act the same, then you probably did it with kindness. You probably did it. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. But if all of a sudden you're now going to change how you react to something, then that might tell you like you weren't really thinking about maybe what could have been going on for them at that time if you were going to yell at them, and now all of a sudden they're not going to yell at them. So I don't know. We can maybe just design some scenarios of that nature to tie.
Yeah, I think that would be great, because then that's the whole idea of I'm seeing you. I'm really seeing you, not just seeing that one little piece of you in school or that.
As we gave them more examples, they would become more thoughtful.
Yes. Right.
And also give like some language when those scenarios do pop up in the classroom. Like thinking about
So true. And I wonder if that book has some scenarios we could pull from and then give the background from the book. Do you know what I mean? Like kind of create the scenario off of the chapter.
All right, thank you so
And
much.
if we could find a video, that would be.
As I walked around, I really appreciated all the really engaged conversations that I was hearing.
I heard so many fantastic ideas, and I'm really excited to just take a moment or two for just a couple groups who might be interested in sharing out something that they talked about for the good of the group. And I'm going to specifically call on our friends over here in 3rd grade.
Mandy made something great she'd love to show you.
I don't know how that I would show you guys, but.
Okay, well,
Talk about the lesson.
we like PBIS world because in whole group-ish situations, tier 1 is kind of where we thought we want to live, because that's more addressing a broader issue. So, Deb had a great idea of doing like a table, because that's more engaging, they think more hands-on and probably processed a little bit more than us just talking at them. Having the kiddos role play, or one kiddo go up and teach, and then we show the behavior like when we would do the role play with the SEL lessons. And then coming back around to reflecting on what they've done, and really will you show your thing?
Yeah, but you have to explain this, that's fine.
I did explain that, now you show.
No, all I did was because I'm a color person and I like to have organization. On that emergenetics, when it says the self-reflection for students and the knowing your why, so I made it into a slideshow. So it matches the colors and asks all the questions throughout it. So you could assign it in Google Classroom and kids could pick out what questions resonate the best with them, and then they could answer appropriately, or you know, if they could answer all of them, but then help them figure out their why.
Share it with us.
I will.
That's a great idea.
That's just the way my brain works.
Fantastic, thank you. Anyone else like to share?
Well, I will just little because our role is so different than like the classroom teachers. But we were talking because we do have these small groups and we still have behavior problems. You know, or like Judy was saying, she has kids come, well, even me, I guess you have kids coming from 2 classes, and sometimes, you know, they make their friends in their classes so they don't get to know each other very well, especially like the younger kids. And so using some of this stuff, we didn't actually come up with a lesson yet, but we're talking how it's important even at our level that sometimes maybe taking a step back and not necessarily doing a lesson or whatever, but doing something like this to bring that group together.
Awesome. Great, thank you so much. All right, will you go ahead and hit the next slide for us? So, at the beginning we kind of had you imagine, you know, a kid that you were thinking about who had done some growth. So we're gonna kind of have just a truly very quick write, where you're gonna be writing from the perspective of one of your students. So from the perspective of, it could be that student, could be a different student. Think about that lesson that you just planned or were starting to plan, or kind of where you think you're going next in that SEL world. And from their perspective, what are they thinking after that lesson? How are they feeling? What sticks with them? What impact did this lesson have on that student? So go ahead and grab your journals and take just a few minutes to jot down just a couple of ideas.
Pick it from the perspective of a student who struggles in that area, and what are they thinking about that lesson? So I'm like that video that you saw, and that kindness lesson. That's what I'm thinking.
Like doing a different restorative circle question just to start each lesson.
Maybe have the talking stick.
And just
Start, you can do whatever you want to do, that's just the one that's in the
It's about our relationships and our connections, and because there's a ton of interruptions during life. There's, you know, kids who have multiple issues. Stay focused. How do we be a student? How do we be a
He has Mark comes here today, I was doing some quick data for his upcoming annual. From Anthony? Yeah, Anthony. Okay, thank you. So smart. Yeah, well, he's so hyper. His asking to talk.
Take just another 30 seconds to kind of wrap up your thoughts as you're journaling.
Focus on the words.
About 10 more seconds. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you, Erin. So thank you for that collaborative time, and one of the goals we have is to share, like we talked about our collective work. When we have like a great idea, share those things out. We can build a catalog of great lessons for SEL and not be alone in that work, and I think that's really powerful. We have some good ideas, right? We don't have to reinvent the wheel, share them out. Let's just take a minute to circle back to where we started today and take a look at opening that document for your post-reflection about our targets. So today we were able to plan for a quick win. How do you feel from the beginning to right now? Where are you at with that goal? And that ability to self-reflect on a student experience. Take a minute just to kind of reflect on those targets where you're at, back to that document that we shared at the very beginning.
John, can you say that again? What are we supposed to type on here? I'm sorry.
Absolutely. So the first time you went through this is your kind of your pre-observation of your thoughts. Now you're just writing your post-reflection, aligned to learning targets.
Are you ready for me to go back? I didn't think you read it right. That's what I don't want to know. If you slide through that. Okay.
Ms. Jim, can you go to the next slide?
Yes.
Before we close and tie our shoes, I still have that challenge of buying my own pair of Doc Martens from Mr. B, and I'm still shopping, by the way. But before we close today, we reflected on our feedback process with the Jamboard. We made some adjustments based on some reflections there. And this piece is going to ask everyone to individually fill out that feedback form before we close our day. So I'd like to just say, with so much gratitude for all of you and all of the work that we're doing to grow kids, and to close for you, I was thinking about those emergenetic reflection questions, those self-reflection questions, like, how are we feeling as people right now? And I just want to remember and help you remember, all of you are amazing people, amazing educators, and all of you are so much more than enough for our kids. And please don't forget to take great care of yourself and know that our work together is just really powerful. So thank you for that learning today. If you go into your individual feedback form, there's just a few questions there that really helps us grow collaboratively in our learning. And after you finish that, have a great rest of your Wednesday afternoon. Thank you, everybody.